Hey friends! My name is Desiree, aka Mama Friendly, and I do all sorts of videos on my channel. Cooking videos, vlogs, hauls, Disney content, a little bit of everything. So if any of that sounds like fun to you, I hope that you'll subscribe and join me on my YouTube adventure. I am in the middle of preparing for Hurricane Milton, but I thought I'd take a minute to relax for a moment, take my mind off of things, and try out a recipe that I've never done before. Today's video is a collab that's hosted by Rob and Sumner. They've been doing monthly collabs all year long, and they're going to continue into the new year, but the theme for this one is Halloween treats. And typically when I hear that that's the brief for a video, I think, well, how can I make like a little themed cake or like a little themed treat of some sort? This time I decided I was going to make my own Halloween candy. You see, I eat gluten and dairy free, and while there's a lot more options these days than there used to be, you typically can't just walk into any Target, Walmart, etc. and find an abundance of candy that's gluten and dairy free, particularly chocolate. So today I'm going to attempt to make a vegan and paleo version of a homemade Twix bar. And because it's paleo and vegan, that means it is naturally gluten and dairy free. This is going to have very few ingredients, very simple ingredients, probably for the most part stuff you already have at home if you're used to gluten and dairy free eating. And if not, the ingredients are very easy to find in stores. We're going to begin by making a vegan caramel sauce, and obviously this is going to be part of our Twix filling, but you could also use this to dip caramel apples in, to make tarts or pies, to drizzle on ice cream, any way that you might use caramel typically. And yes, I say caramel, not caramel. So for the caramel, we're only going to need a half cup of almond butter, is what the recipe calls for, but I have peanut butter, so that's what I'm going to use. Half a cup of that, 6 tablespoons of maple syrup, 6 tablespoons of coconut oil. If you're not too worried about the casein in the ghee, you could use ghee instead, but I am, so I'm going with straight coconut oil. And you're also going to need 1 teaspoon of sea salt. Since we're already on the topic of ingredients, to make the rest of the Twix bars, we're going to need some configuration of this, plus some chocolate chips and some coconut flour. The chocolate chips I always use are the Enjoy Life brand because they're allergy friendly, so I know that they're going to work for me in this recipe. So for my vegan caramel sauce, gotta put all of our ingredients together, so I'm going to, in a small saucepan, add my 6 tablespoons of maple syrup, and just set your maple syrup aside because you're going to need that for the Twix portion as well. 6 tablespoons of coconut oil. If your coconut oil is a little bit meltier, or if you even wanted to melt it to make it easier to measure and scoop, then by all means, because either way in this particular situation it's getting melted down anyways. Next is going to be my half cup of peanut butter, almond butter. If you have a nut allergy, I'm sure you could even get away with using sunflower seed butter in this situation. I'm putting that in there as well. And lastly, a teaspoon of sea salt. I'm going to heat this on my stovetop over medium heat for 3 to 4 minutes. And I want to make sure to whisk or mix this frequently because I don't want it to burn. There's a lot of sugar in here, and so the tendency to burn is high. Whatever else happens, we're definitely going to remove it from the heat after 4 minutes so that it doesn't separate and clump. And once the mixture is thickened and browned, we'll be removing it like I said, and we're going to cool it slightly before using it. It's going to continue to thicken as it cools. And if you're not using it for this application, if you just wanted to make caramel sauce for any of the other types of uses I mentioned earlier, you could keep this in an airtight container in your fridge for up to a month. Now it will harden once it's chilled, but you can reheat it in the microwave, or you can reheat it just like this on the stovetop, whatever works. I've gone ahead and set my caramel off to one side, safely far away from me so I can't possibly walk into it and knock it over or something. We're talking about a boiling liquid, and not just that, boiling sugar, so we do not want to mess around with that. I am currently preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and while that preheats and my caramel starts to cool, I'm going to start making my shortbread layer. So in this bowl, I'm going to go ahead and put 1 1/4 cups of coconut flour. That's about that. Next goes in 1/3 cup of coconut oil, softened, not melted, which is actually pretty much the state of mine, so that's perfect. There goes that. I think we need an assist. And y'all have been looking at a jar this entire time. Whoops, sorry about that. Try to focus on the video making, but sometimes the cooking takes over. And lastly, we need 1/4 cup of maple syrup right into the bowl as well. And we're going to mix this all together until a dough forms. And I'm going to get out an 8x8 pan, whether that's glass, metal, entirely up to you. I am, however, going to line it with some parchment paper though, because I want to be able to pull my shortbread out in one piece without having to worry about it getting stuck to the pan. Okay, I've done what I can with the spoon, but I think I'm going to have to get in here with my hands. Obviously, clean hands before and after. If you're cooking for a crowd, feel free to use gloves. However, I think that the scientific consensus is that you're a lot likelier to have a more sterile or clean result if you wash your hands frequently rather than relying on the gloves to keep you clean. Because the problem with gloves is that then you start to rely on the gloves and you're likelier to cross-contaminate or do otherwise nasty stuff because you have that false sense of security with the gloves. Pretty much got a nice shaggy shortbread dough formed now. To my surprise, apparently I lent out my 8x8 glass dish and it is not here. So that's fine. We pivot. I'm going to use a similarly sized, albeit differently shaped pan. I'm going to use our parchment paper situation just the same. No big deal. Should still be able to get bars out of this pan. We're just going to have to pivot a little bit. It's fine. And now I'm going to mash this so that it forms an even layer in our pan. I'm also going to try to fold or unfold the paper, I guess, depending on how you look at it, so that the shortbread can get into every corner of the pan and not get deviated by the paper. Do your best. It doesn't have to be perfect. We are making homemade treats after all. Whoever you're serving this to will appreciate the effort, regardless of how perfect it looks. So now that my oven is preheated and we've got our shortbread dough in our pan, we're going to put this into the oven for 10 minutes until it's golden brown around the edges. I'm going to take it out of the oven at that point and I'm going to let it cool for 10 minutes. If you wanted to, you could use this baking and cooling time to work on your caramel. But we've already done that. Okay, we've got our shortbread here. It is smelling toasty. It feels cooked. And so I'm going to let this cool for 10 minutes. At that point, I'm going to pour our caramel over the top and try to spread it out evenly. And the entire pan is going to go into the freezer for an hour so that we can let the caramel set before we cut this into bars, melt our chocolate, and dip for our final Twixification. Alright, Pallies, it's been slightly over an hour, and remember I said earlier that we were prepping for Hurricane Milton? Our freezer is packed, and the stuff in there is not super well organized, so I guess the pan kind of tilted while it was in the freezer, and so some of the bars came out a little thinner on the caramel, and some of them came out quite thick. So hopefully that's not going to happen to you, but it did happen to me, and so that's what we're going to work with. I've got our chocolate dip here, so in order to make this, I took 1.5 cups of that dairy-free Enjoy Life chocolate chips. I put 2 tablespoons of coconut oil in here, and some flaky sea salt. You could also reserve the salt and just put it over the top of the bars. That could also be pretty if you wanted to do it that way. But I basically put it in the microwave for 15-second bursts, and it took me a minute to get it smooth like this. So now I'm gonna take each bar, I suppose, or pieces of bar. You could also even cut these. I might do that actually, because I went ahead and made 8 bars, but they're kind of big. So I think we could get away with doing 16 bars even. And if you wanted to, you could go even smaller than that and make them like fun size. Yeah, that's better. So now let's grab any one. We'll dip it in the chocolate, kind of roll it around in there. I'm just using my hands. You could use a fork, you could use whatever you want. And there is a Twix bar. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do this with all of them. I should have enough chocolate. I have more chocolate chips if I need to make more sort of ganache for dipping. Almost always when a recipe says you need this much chocolate so that you can melt and dip stuff in it, it ends up being way too much. But these are a lot of bars and they're getting full coverage. So it might be just enough actually in our case. If you wanted to, you could do that and make them pretty. Alright pals, we managed to get every single one of them dipped pretty thoroughly. I did have enough chocolate, and actually I have some chocolate left over, but it looked like it might be kind of close at some point, so your mileage may vary. Now you're meant to put these back into the freezer for 5 minutes to let the chocolate set before you eat them. I'm not even quite sure how I'm going to manage that right now because I'm going to end up making a huge mess. But I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to do that for you guys, and then I'll come back and do a taste test with you. Alright friends, there's my first go at homemade Twix bars. Were they the prettiest things on earth? Not really. But they were delicious. They were really, really simple to put together, and I'm sure kids would have a blast getting their hands dirty and helping you make these. Remember that this video has been part of a collab, so if you want to see what all of my other friends made for their Halloween treats, check out the playlist in the description box below, where you'll also find a link to Robin Sumner's cooking channel. And if you tried this recipe for yourself, I'd love for you to come back and let me know how you liked it. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. Thanks so much again for watching, and happy Halloween! Bye!